The man will stand up, keep proud. Say it with me, yeah. Say it loud. We will not be idle anymore. We will not be idle anymore.
So there you go. I'm John Kane, and this is Resistance Radio, and I will follow up on some of what Reggie was talking about this week. Hey, I'm broadcasting live in New York City today. I usually take the show and then I have it reposted for Washington, D.C., but I'm going to do a live show in Washington tomorrow as well. So, hey, if you want to catch this show and then listen to me in Washington, you can do so, and they won't exactly mirror each other. In fact, I plan on. I want to engage Reggie a little bit this week. I know I've been kind of filling up my my slot here for the last few weeks, but sometimes I feel like if I don't engage somebody, then I'm just gonna go mad in this. I'm just gonna go crazy here. So, a couple of things. First off, let me address a little bit what Reggie talked about. I mean, it is absurd that this is the anniversary of a country being formed on top of another existing people. But as Reggie was suggesting, this has been done before. And I think it's really important that people understand just what he was talking about. And here's the classic example. The longest serving Chief Justice in the history of the United States was a guy by the name of John Marshall. He served for like 34 years as the Chief Justice of the United States. And it was mostly in the at the turn of the century, from 1800 on to the 1830s. And he was a part of fashioning some legal doctrines specifically addressing Native people that still exist today. And those are the three that I always talk about on the show, so I'm going to mention them right now. Of course, the doctrine of Christian discovery was cited as recently as 2005 specifically by Ruth Bader Ginsburg in a case involving the Oneidas, one of the Six Nations. The trust doctrine, which is cited continuously, and I'm going to talk about the trust here in a little bit. And of course, the plenary powers doctrine. I'm going to talk about that a little bit today too. But one of the things that is one of the most outrageous parts of any of these is what John Marshall described as an extravagant pretension. And what he said, however extravagant the pretension is to convert the discovery of an inhabited country into conquest may appear, if you can do it in the first instance and then sustain it and then build upon it, build communities upon it, build a country upon it, then it becomes law and it cannot be challenged. So he said that in 1823. So when you think about 77 years ago, or 70 years ago for the for this anniversary, this dreaded anniversary, it goes back a long time. And this is all about the doctrine of Christian discovery. This is all about this idea that religious doctrine can dictate law. And of course, that's what Israel is all about, right? But I think it's so important that people realize that when I talk about this history, whether it's 70 years ago or whether it's 1823, 200 years ago, the stuff still exists today. And that's what I really can't get past. And so, I appreciate Reggie referencing this because he knows I've talked about this extravagant pretension, and those aren't my words. This is the guy, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, acknowledging that they're lying. I mean, that's what he's saying. I mean, just so we understand the euphemism here. However extravagant the pretension, in other words, however extravagant or however big the lie is, if we can say it right from the beginning and then sustain that lie, it becomes a truth. That's essentially what Chief Justice John Marshall is saying. Of course, the worst part about it is they didn't even assert it in the first instance. I mean, he mentions this in 1823. There are already decades of treaties that have been entered into by the United States from George Washington on, and even treaties before that the United States inherited from Great Britain, where our land title was acknowledged. So I mean, there's lie built on top of lie with this stuff, and that's what we see. That's what we see coming out of out of modern history, right? That's what we're seeing today. So I appreciate Reggie throwing me that softball because these are the things that I find easy.
I knew. Look, backstory, John. I knew that this programming was going to come up, and I knew you was going to be the next live show that was going to come up. And I said, this makes so much sense. And I knew that when a break was going to happen, I tossed you that softball on purpose.
I know you did. I know you did.
And I know that you was going to fully articulate what I was trying to lead, to allude on what's going on, because John, you are absolutely correct. All these things need to be explained and connect all of these things, because what has happened over in that part of the world and what has happened here in this part of the world, it's all connected, and the suffering of all people under the oppression of imperialism and colonialism and all these things comes from the same source.
Well, and it's supported. It's all supported by the same ideology. Whether it's Judaism or Christianity. I mean, it almost doesn't even matter because those things are so embedded with each other. And of course, they're very much supported by the United States. Look, even the so-called left of the the political spectrum has a really hard time openly condemning. Yeah, they'll condemn some of the death and the destruction and that kind of stuff, but they still have a hard time condemning Israel directly. And and this is what we see. And look, I know there's a lot of people who say, well, if genocide against one is genocide against all. Well, that's not exactly true. I mean, because there are certain peoples that have been singled out for millennia. I mean, for certainly for centuries. And as a Native person, I have a hard time because look, I got so involved in the mascot battle, and the mascot battle to me is emblematic of the unique racism that Native people experience. Okay, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today, based on a couple of phone calls I had this week. But it's only emblematic of it. What we really experience is the fact that there is a body of law based on legal doctrine, slave era legal doctrine, that still exists today, that still impacts us today. And look, I'm going to even talk about one of the justices on the court today, one you wouldn't expect to raise some issues to almost demonstrate what the lie is. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So let me jump around a little bit here. I didn't want too much space to go between Reggie's softball and my hit here. So let me remind people we are Listener Support Radio. Apparently, I need to raise $90,000 in the next hour, so you guys better get to it, okay? So I mean, we're close, but I think we got to raise $90,000 in this hour. No, I'm only kidding. We need to raise something, though. We need to do something. I need you folks to go to the pledge line, go to the website, and become a BAI buddy. Do it in the name of the show, even if you don't do it in the name of the show. I mean, I would appreciate you doing so. It does kind of provides at least some metric that somebody's listening to this program. And I know that you are. I mean, I know that you are. Every once in a while, I do a show where the message that I'm sending out hits the exact intended target. It doesn't always happen that way. But I also don't know sometimes, what about the people I'm not hitting directly? And I gotta say, if there's one thing that concerns me about WBAI is that our demographic isn't very young. And I wish we had younger people. And I'm going to talk about a circumstance that took me a little bit by surprise. But I got to tell you, I was worried about it. But before I do that, let me finish here with the pitch. I do need you to support WBAI. We all need you to support WBAI. And we have a goal, and whether we make that goal or not, it doesn't stop us from asking each and every one of you. And look, we know that if we got 5% of the people who listen to this program or listen to WBAI to donate, we'd be all set. I mean, it is a big market in New York City. I know there's a whole different, a whole bunch of people who come up with metrics to figure out how many people are listening. We don't really know. But I do know how many people will view a video that I post, and this one will get posted up as a video. So I do have a sense for how many people or that a number of people do listen to the program. And I got to tell you, if we got just a couple of percentages of the people who listen to this program or to WBI generally to make a donation, it would make all the difference in the world. And we're not asking you to break the bank here. If you can do, $10 or $20 a month, become a buddy, a sustaining member of the station by becoming a buddy, that's something that we will tally up over the course of a year. So, that $10 a month is $120 a year as far as we're concerned. So that's what we're trying to do here. There was a time, and Reggie can back me up on this, as a 1 hour, 1 day a week show, I used to have more buddies than most of the programming on WBAI. I don't know what happened to that.
You're right.
I don't know what happened to that. Some of you guys shifted. Maybe you jumped onto another program, which is fine. I just hope that you didn't disappear completely. And if you have, I hope you come back. So let me go ahead and give the numbers again. Sorry, I got to wear glasses these days. I'm not getting any younger. Okay, there we go.
You got it.
Yeah,
833-922-4692, 833-922-4692, or 833-WBAI NYC, 833-WBAI NYC. And for those people who want to become a listener sustainer, those are the individuals who choose to take out a little bit at a time, as little as $5 a month. And if you are listening to WBAI.org while listening to this program, you can go to buddy.wbai.org. That's buddy.wbai.org. Back to you, John.
All right. Well, on that note, look, if you do call and you happen to get a voicemail, we do have people who are manning phones all the time, but sometimes we can get more than one caller calling in, or more than a couple callers. So if you do get a voicemail, all we ask is that you leave your name and your number, and we'll get somebody right back to you. So, I mean, we're not going to leave you hanging forever, and we don't want you to, feel weird about leaving a whole lot of other information on a voicemail. Just leave your name and your number, and we'll get somebody right back to you, and we'll complete a secure transaction with you to make a one-time donation, a time donation, or become a sustaining member of the station and of the program. And that's what we ask of you. We ask it every week. We ask it every day, probably every show. I know I try to do some sort of pitch every program that I do. And, look, this show airs for the most part in Washington and in New York. I used to live stream on Facebook, but now my internet hasn't been really great. So now I record the video, I post it up as a video after the fact, I put it up as a YouTube video as well. There's any number of ways to either, if you want to watch me say these words, or if you just want to listen, I put it up as a podcast too, so you can find me on any of your favorite podcast platforms. There are any number of ways to listen to this thing, but however you listen, you do have to understand that we are a radio show. And, I began this radio show on WBAI. I don't even know how many years ago. It's over a decade now. I mean, I've been doing this for quite a while here. I was a featured host for Tiokasin when he went away or took time off. So I've been doing some form of radio on WBAI for a number of years. So I hope that you'll stick with us. I hope that you'll do what you can in a time where our voices like ours are really trying to be silenced. And I think that's what people have to understand. It's not like there are people that are really rushing, to clamoring to us to keep this information flowing. Sometimes we have hurdles. We have obstacles we got to fight. I mean, we had to get through the whole COVID thing. That's why today I could do my show from my own studio on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. And I think it's important that people realize, look, the name of the show is Resistance Radio. There's nothing in that name that necessarily tips you off right away that this is a native program. But look, being native is all about resisting at some level. Look, we don't all resist the same, but part of what I think is unique about this is I do this show from a native territory. I live in a native community. I'm the second to last home on a dead end road on the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. That's what I do, where I do the show from. On the rare occasions, and hopefully we can make it a little more frequent, that I make it to New York and I could sit in the studio with Reggie, I love doing that. And I would love to come to New York and do some live events as well. Come in and screen a film, do a speaking engagement, and do a live show in studio. And that's what I hope we get back to. I used to do that. For those of you that remember, I used to do quite a bit of that. We're hoping to get back to doing that again. So, but we need your support. I need to be on the radio. I need New York's market because of the reach. I need Washington's market because of the reach and because of who I'm reaching in those markets. So I need you. Look, we oftentimes hear people say, "What can I do to help?" What can I do to help the resistance? Well, I'll tell you one thing you can do. You can keep me on the radio. So, again, go to the pledge lines, go to the website, follow the prompts, listen, and just provide the information and be a supporter of WBAI and be a supporter of Resistance Radio. All right, so Reg, here's where I wanted to go here. I got a call from the New York State Education Department, NYSED, this week. Part of what they had emailed me a copy of their response to the Trump administration's complaint, civil rights complaint about the mascot issue. As you probably saw, he was posing for pictures with Massapequa jerseys and the logo and their mascot and all that other nonsense. And of course, I would expect nothing less from this guy, to be honest with you. And look, I realize that a lot of the stupid things that come out of Trump's mouth are just a distraction, and this is too. I mean, there's no way that the Trump administration and his wrestling lady, believe that they're going to Secretary of Education. In case I have to explain that to anybody, the wrestling lady.
Linda McMahon.
Yeah, there's no way that they believe that they're going to overturn the statewide ban. First off, let me be clear here. The Trump administration has already threatened every state that has a DEI policy associated with either their offices or their schools, threatened to cut funding, and education funding is what he's threatening with. So he's going to take away lunch money, and kids with special needs, special ed, funding, because he doesn't believe that there should be equity in education. Bottom line, let's just call it what it is. He doesn't, beyond the diversity and the inclusion, the center of that word is equity. It's about fairness, and he's opposed to that. So he's already threatened these states, and in fact, he's threatened the state of Maine over the whole transgender debacle that they keep conflating to be a national problem. And the governor of Maine said, "I'll see you in court." She did, and she beat him. So Trump has already put all the threats out there to cut education funding and various other funding to the state, and the states have said, "Oh hell no, we're not gonna buckle under." Now, New York State sure as hell wasn't going to buckle under over the mascot issue. Let me address a couple of things with the mascot issue, things that I haven't really said before, and part of it is I forgot. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but there's so much information, there's so much research and reporting that can be done on this issue that, and I cover most of it. I cover probably more comprehensively than most people do. But here's the one thing I forgot, and I know this because I read it in NYSED's response to the complaint and investigation on civil rights that the Trump administration and others had pushed forward over the mascot issue, over Massapequa in particular. The first thing that these guys mentioned was that in 2001, and let me remind you, 2001, there was a president, his name was Bush. I think it was George W. Bush at the time, who was the president of the United States. Republican. Okay, just so we can clear that up, right? There was also a governor in the state of New York, George Pataki. I think he might have been the last Republican governor in the state of New York, if I'm not mistaken. So
you are correct, sir. So
what happened in 2001 were two things. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights issued a statement. They issued a report, and they were calling for the end of the use of native imagery and names for sports teams for schools. This is the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. This is a federal agency. This is a national department. This wasn't the states. It wasn't the liberal snowflakes, that were pushing this. This was, again, the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights under the Bush administration that made this recommendation. And it wasn't just a recommendation. They literally were calling on schools to end it. They didn't put a ban in place. They just made this as a statement, and of course, they issued all of the information as to why. Why it's harmful. Whatever, regardless of anybody's supposed intent to honor Native people, which I think is all BS anyway. They made it clear Native people aren't honored by it. They just aren't. And so after the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights issued this, the Commissioner of Education for the state of New York, again under Republican George Pataki, issued a memo to all schools. He issued the memo and he told schools to get rid of them. Get rid of the Native mascots, do it in a time that was practical, not trying to create a financial burden on your school. This is 2001, mind you, 2001. That's what he said in 2001. And you know what? Many schools, I don't even know if it's most, but it was probably most schools in New York State did get rid of them. But some didn't. Some doubled down. And when I say some, I still mean over 100 schools kept it. They just completely disregarded the Commission on Civil Rights from the federal government and the Commissioner of Education at the state level. Now, his memorandum was challenged in law, and it withstood all of the legal challenges. I mean, it wasn't a mandate, it wasn't a ban, but what he told schools was get rid of it. And there were folks that thought that he had stepped over the line, saying such a thing. And of course the courts upheld that he had absolutely the right to tell schools to do this. Now again, there was no deadline associated. He said do it in a time that's practical. And part of it was out of consideration for schools, realizing that changing the mascot can have an expense to it. But if you just phase it out over time, if you replace the uniforms, as you have to do things like redo murals and that kind of stuff. He didn't give a deadline, but he sure as hell didn't mean 24 years. He wasn't saying, don't do a damn thing for 24 years and then we'll see where we stand. No, that's not what he said. He said, phase them out, get rid of them in a time that's practical. Now, NYSED was pretty silent for the next 20 years. I mean, on the issue specifically. Now, they did do certain things, right? The state passed the Dignity for All Students Act, which was, worked hand in hand with the Education Department. And this was about creating a law that would prohibit discrimination in school. Now, I don't know how you have a race-based mascot and not realize that that's, a violation of the law. But that got passed since Commissioner Mills had passed this or issued this memo. And like I said, many schools did away with this. We also saw professional teams. Well, let me back up before that. We saw, somebody that I really admire, a woman by the name of Charlene Teeters, who took on the University of Illinois and their Fighting Illini and their mascot that they used to run out of the basketball court and on a football field in a costume and do acrobatics and that kind of stuff. But she took it on. She took that fight on at the University of Illinois. She was a teacher and a student at the same time, if I recall. So Charlene Teeters was on the forefront of this battle over the University of Illinois. She had beer thrown on her. She had people spitting on her, throwing food at her, just absolutely making her life miserable. But she didn't back down. She didn't back down. And look, there weren't legions of people there with her, supporting her almost one-person protest. Now, I'm not saying she didn't have support, but she was out in the forefront of this thing, more so than anybody else in, and this is like in the 70s. This is the late 70s. What came of her work was ultimately a ban by the NCAA. They actually forbid all schools from having Native. I don't know. For some reason, this didn't make the headlines that it should have. So Syracuse University, they used to have the Saltine Warrior. They used to have, they called it Orangemen, but they also had Native mascotry associated with it. St. John's, the Redmen, Dartmouth, Stanford, all of these schools had Native mascots, and they all got rid of them. The only school kept it, and there may be one other one, but I know the one school that kept theirs was Florida State University. And that's because the Seminoles of Florida made some sort of deal. And so their mockery continues. And it is mockery. Because, Reggie, I don't know if you know this, but have you ever seen what they do at the Florida State? They actually ride a guy out on a horse,
Yeah.
and they call him Chief Osceola, and he carries a spear. They have some white guy playing this native guy. Then they have another white guy light the spear up so it's a flaming spear, and then he rides out on the football field and he chucks the spear, and then it lands in the ground.
Oh,
so
a spear chucker, huh?
So yeah, Seminoles are reduced to being, their historic, iconic individual, Chief Osceola, as a spear chucker, on horseback, no less. And I guess just gotta say, we don't associate Seminoles with being horsemen. I'm not saying there aren't Seminoles who ride horses, but historically, that's the Plains Indian thing, right? That's the Hollywood thing. So they take the Hollywood image and they bring it to Florida, and they put Chief Osceola on a horse, ride him out there, and they make him a spear chucker. So yeah, they're absolutely, it's embarrassing. But Florida State has permission from the Seminoles, so that's the only college. And I think people forget all of these universities change their mascots. It's like it doesn't make news. It's not newsworthy for whatever reason. This band that I played a primary role in getting through in New York State didn't make news. Didn't make news until the moron in the White House steps up and starts hoisting up Massapequa jerseys. Now all of a sudden everyone wants to call me up. And look, I'm happy to talk about this issue. But you know what? A funny thing, Reggie, is that we were never allowed access to students. When we talk about this issue, I offered to do assemblies. I offered to go to schools. Nobody had to pay me anything. I would have loved to explain to students. Now, I had a few school boards ask me to come in and talk to them, but they didn't want us to have access to Native kids or to kids in general. So where are the kids seeing any of this stuff? All these things see is the news coverage. Well, I got to tell you, like I said, I got a call. First, I got the emails from NYSED just a couple of days ago, sending me their response, and that's why I was reminded about the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights doing what they did. But then I got a call, and I got to tell you, the email was also one expressing gratitude for the role that those of us who were on the Indigenous Mascots Advisory Council played, because we shaped the regulations. Most people don't know that. They think it's just a state doing it. But no, it was a group of Native people that helped shape some of these regulations. You have law, then you have the regulations, and then you have policy. And those three things overlap, but you don't have one, you can't have one without the other, essentially. So, but here's what happened. The guy who called me, and I don't want to name him because I haven't talked to him about, talking about this on my radio show. Although he did encourage me to spread the news on their response to the Trump administration, which I have done. But what he told me was that he had gone to either a lacrosse game or a lacrosse tournament, girls lacrosse, and the school that just down the hill from where I live here, Gowanda School, he talked to some of the Gowanda girls. And I assume he meant Native girls, but he didn't say that specifically, so I could be wrong. But and as he was telling me the story, I got to tell you, I got a little nervous because I knew he was going to ask them about Native mascots. And here's the thing. We haven't coached these kids. We haven't even really been allowed to address the children directly about the mascot issue. So when he asks these kids, what's your feeling of these schools that had these Native mascots? And and some of them have been gone already for a while. But so we asked these Native girls, and they said we hate it. And man, I was relieved when he told me that, because my fear was that they would be apathetic to the issue, because that's the way the media covers it. Oh, it's just a bunch of liberal white people that are making this issue. The Native people don't even care. And the thing is, you tell people that you don't care, and it's possible your opinion could be swayed on that. So when he asked these girls, he said, so what is it that you hate about it? He goes, and the girl said, they're mocking us. I mean, we compete against them in a Native sport like lacrosse, and they're just gloating over the fact that they're calling themselves warriors or redskins or savages or Indians. And we're the Gowanda Panthers. So we get mocked because we're the Native people playing against these teams. And they're gloating on the fact that they have essentially taken our identity and they play our sport using our identity. And look, so these girls said this stuff, And I couldn't have been prouder. I mean to tell you, Reg, I could not have been prouder of these girls stepping up. And you know what? I should have known, because when we were battling the Lancaster School District about, I don't know, 15 years ago, you know, we got invited in by the school board to educate them, right? And we did. And I think we did a great job. I was a part of a committee of Native people, including professors from UB, a couple of people who were artists, some other public speakers like myself. But there was a whole group of us. And I think we all did a great job. But you know what? We had the Lancaster School Board ready to look into changing this mascot the subsequent year. But here's what happened. Native kids from 3 of the school districts that have a significant student body population, and I mean Akron, which is where the Tonawanda Seneca kids go to school, Niagara Wheatfield, which is where the Tuscarora kids go to school, and then Lakeshore, which is the school where many of the kids from this territory, some go to Gwinnett, but some go to Lakeshore and some go to Silver Creek. There's 3 school districts that service the Seneca children here. Native kids from athletes, primarily lacrosse players, from those 3 schools organized with the non-native students, with the coaching staff, with their parents, and ultimately with the entire school to boycott Lancaster. And when they were asked, why do you want to do this? Is it just because of their name? And they said, no, it's the way they treat us. They treat us, they're racist. Not only do they run around calling themselves Redskins, but they're obnoxious about it, and they mock us. So that was 15 years ago. But, you know, there was a lot more in the news then. So while I was absolutely pleased, and I understood that they played as big a factor in getting that mascot changed then as we did as adults, I was nervous as the gentleman from NYSED was talking to these girls from Gwanda. I didn't know what the response was going to be, but again, I couldn't have been prouder. Look, I know their parents. I mean, I don't know the kids necessarily myself. Too old to know that, but I could not have been prouder. But this is what I alluded to earlier when I say one of the things that concerns me about being on WBAI is the demographic. It's an older demographic. We've got to get more kids listening to some of the stuff that we talk about here on this radio station. So, yes, I hope that people will donate to the station and they'll donate in the name of this program. But I got to tell you, you got to spread the word. And, you know, and this show in particular, I make it available. I make it available, you know, as a Facebook video. I realize a lot of kids aren't even into Facebook anymore. But I put it up as a YouTube video. It's out there. You know, I encourage people to take pieces. You can do whatever you want to my videos, to my audio. You can share it in excerpt form, whatever you've got to do. But we have got to educate young people because they want to take a stand. Those girls took a stand. But you know what? I don't know if any of my words, apparently it wasn't completely necessary, but I don't know if any of my words ever reached them. But, you know, Reg, I think that's one of the problems I think we have with WBAI. We aren't reaching the younger audience. And, you know, we're almost in an echo chamber sometimes. We're talking to the same people who see things exactly the way we do. And we've got to reach out. We've got to get younger people involved in this, in the programming and in the listenership. I don't know what the answer to that is, you know, and, you know, of course, I'm talking about being on the air in New York City. I know we're competing against a lot of information that's out there, but we've got to be a little bit more progressive as a radio station to figure out how we can have sound bites, audio clips, video clips of the people on this radio station, and trying to impact younger people. I don't know what the answer is, and I don't know if you right. How much conversation. I mean, you must have had some of these conversations with some folks, right?
Oh my goodness, John. I mean, like, I've had this conversation more often than I should. I mean, like, I don't have the solution to this problem, but I know what will help is engagement. And since the pandemic, I see that WBAI, you know, and essentially WBAI is being represented by its producers, you know, out there. And the thing is that we used to do events, outdoor events.
Absolutely.
You know, how we get the young people is us being present. Okay, it's like I remember the time when the International African Arts Festival happens, and we're out there, and you're seeing people of all different sizes and ages. I remember when
And
we would be
complexion.
out on and complexion as well too. No, for real, it is.
Yeah.
As well as in Labor Day, we would be on the Eastern Parkway presenting a presentation for the Labor Day West Indian Carnival, and not. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I'm trying to make attempts on doing that. This
Indigenous
Saturday
Peoples
coming
Day.
up.
I don't think we've had a presence at any of those events in quite a while.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. I know you was involved with something.
Yeah,
over
I've
at
gone to a
Randall's
couple
Island.
of
Was
those
that-
events, you know, and
Yeah, but
and
that
I
hasn't
can
been a
promote
while,
it.
though.
But yeah, it has been a
Right.
while. Well, and I got to tell you,
Yeah, it's-
when I first was got a show on WBI after I had covered for Tiokasin for a year, one of the first things that we had done at that time in that time period was I worked with Mimi Rosenberg, and we did the climate change march, the climate march in New
Right,
York,
right,
and
right,
we broadcast
right.
live right from Columbia, close to Columbia Circle. Ironic, Columbia Circle. Yeah. Anyway, we were up there, and yeah. So we did we set up. We had a table. We had people coming in. We even had somebody drive in from south of New York City, drove all the way up there and came to our table to talk about how they were listening to us on the air. We were on for hours. So that's the amount of community engagement we have. And I realize that COVID put a damper on all that stuff. I mean, I used to come in and do more
Yes.
stuff, but we've got to do more. We just have to do more. And,
Yes.
and it's the only way
Yes.
we're going to reach a broader demographic. And by that, I mean age demographic, cultural demographic, all of it. I think the diversity of our listenership is pretty well represented ethnically, but not by age. Not by age. And we've got to do it. We've got to do a better job. We just got to do a better job.
I agree.
All right.
Absolutely.
So I mentioned I was going to talk about again legal doctrines, and I know I talk about this all the time. So there's probably some people saying, "Oh, he's going to go through that again." But here's the thing. What I've come to realize is that just like John Marshall in 1823 knew they were lying, the current justices know they're lying too. And they just do. And you know what? They're so arrogant that they don't even mind admitting it. And so when I talk about things like the plenary powers doctrine or the trust doctrine, I'm not the only one who thinks it's a load of BS. So I wanted to read an excerpt, just a piece, and this is from Samuel Alito. Not exactly the most progressive thinking guy on the bench, I might say, but this was a case of the United States versus the Hickory Apache Nation from 2011. So we're only talking about a little over a decade ago. And what the case was about was that the Apache wanted full disclosure on what was being negotiated on their behalf when it came to mining. I mean, you'd think they'd be entitled to that. And what they did was they said they had a right to what the lawyers representing even the United States was supposed to be negotiating on their behalf. And what they said is, look, we're their clients. This whole so-called trust responsibility, we are the clients. And the court said, nah, not really. I mean, the lawyer-client privilege is between those lawyers and the United States, not to you. And they had to justify it some sort. So the Apache could not get access to any of the negotiations, any of the sidebar notes, none of the information that the United States was supposedly negotiating on their behalf. And you can only imagine why they're hiding that stuff. You can only imagine it, right? So here's what Sam Alito wrote in his opinion as they were trying to justify keeping this information from the Hickory Apache. He says, as we have recognized in prior cases, Congress may style its relationship with Indians a trust without assuming all the fiduciary duties of a private trust, creating a trust relationship that is limited or bare compared to a trust relationship between private parties at common law. And I'll get back to that paragraph all by itself. But then he continues. He goes, throughout the history of the Indian trust relationship, and I'm doing air quotes in case you can't see me, we have recognized that the organization and management of the trust is a sovereign function subject to the plenary powers of Congress. So they directly connect this trust relationship and the plenary powers. It's a direct connection. It's not like, it isn't just reference, it's direct. And it says, then he continues, he says, because the Indian trust relationship represents an exercise of that authority, the authority of Congress, we have explained that the government has a real and direct interest in the guardianship it exercises over Indian tribes. The interest is one which is vested in it as a sovereign. This is especially so because the government has often structured the trust relationship to pursue its own policy goals. Thus, while trust administration relates to the welfare of Indians, the maintenance and limitation which Congress has prescribed as part of its plan of distribution is distinctly in the interest of the United States. Now, I don't know what you call all that, but basically Sam Alito, and he basically said, well, it's not really a trust. We style it a trust. We call it a trust, but it doesn't have all of the fiduciary duties that a real trust has. And if it doesn't have all, the question is, does it have any? And especially if you're saying this is all created, this whole trust BS is about Congress asserting its plenary powers. And for those who don't recall, plenary means ultimate, absolute power over Native people. And Alito doesn't even hedge on this thing. He said, the bottom line is, this is how we control them. Our guardianship, our authority over these people is what this whole trust thing is all about. It has nothing to do with really providing, first off, I've said this before, but there are certain aspects associated with a trust. Somebody has to have the power to create it, okay? There has to be an entity that has the power to create the trust. Then there's the trustee, and then there's the beneficiary or the ward. There has to be a legal basis to establish any of this stuff. I mean, the idea that Native people weren't even citizens of the United States when they developed this whole thing. I mean, so you just like you were grabbing kids and throwing them into residential schools, you were grabbing an entire population, a diverse population at that, and saying, yeah, you guys are just wards of the federal government. We are your trustee. Now, we say wards. Technically, it should be beneficiary, but if we say that beneficiary, that means that you're going to expect to be the beneficiary, and they have no intention of us being. They said it might be related to our welfare. They don't even say related to our good welfare. They just said it might be related to the welfare of Indians, but it's not bound by it. It's only bound by the national interest of the United States. This is Sam Alito admitting what a crock of crap the whole trust relationship and the plenary powers is. And he's not the only one. I mean, Clarence Thomas was another guy and these are the right-wingers, guys. These are not my favorite people on the planet here. But Clarence Thomas basically said, I see no evidence that Congress was ever intended to have this kind of power over Native people. In another case, Sam Alito, let me tell you what case it is. In the Indian Child Welfare Defense case against the Brackeens, they were challenging whether the Indian Child Welfare Act was a violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment because they said it was discriminatory. It wasn't allowing white people to own Native kids. I know, adopt, but they meant own. It wouldn't, and it was depriving Native kids of the right to be raised by affluent white people. What could be more discriminatory than that? And you know what the court said? Nothing on those issues. All the court said was that Congress has plenary powers. They pass the law, you can't challenge it. It's unchallengeable. So they not only have this unique authority, but it's an exclusive authority, exclusive to Congress and exclusive in its application to Native people. And you can't challenge it. You cannot challenge the constitutionality of a law that that Congress passes about Native people. That's essentially what the court said. But not all the judges agreed with that. In fact, Alito was one of the judges who voted against defense of the Indian Child Welfare Act on that basis, on the plenary powers basis. And you know what? He had the Solicitor General in oral arguments, and he said, well, I don't understand. He said, if plenary means plenary, because that's the argument that even the Solicitor General is making, that the Congress passed a law, so it's got to stand. So Alito said, well, if plenary is plenary, then Congress can do whatever it wants to Native people. And if there's limits to that power, I don't see where any of it is. This is Sam Alito in oral arguments questioning the Solicitor General, a guy by the name of Needler. And he said, well, their limits will be based on, you got to love this one, Reg. Their limits will be based on their trust responsibility. So you talk about completely circular reasoning. They build a trust responsibility out of a way to administer ultimate authority over us. And then they say the limit to that ultimate authority is the trust responsibility. I mean, this is,
you can't make this stuff
but here's the thing, Reg. It's like nobody knows this. You've never heard this said to you. This has never been on the radio before, unless I said it. Now, and it's not because I'm the most brilliant person on the planet. It's just that you have to do the research. And then when you find out that one of the right-wing judges, Sam Alito, along with his other right-wing judge, Clarence Thomas, are questioning whether Congress really has any of this power in the first place. It makes, and where the freak are the liberal justices? Well, we know that Ruth Bader Ginsburg cited the doctrine of discovery against the Oneidas, in 2005. But all of those liberal justices, Kagan, Sotomayor, what's the other one? Jackson.
Yeah.
They never said anything about questioning the plenary powers. They were so concerned about the outcome that they wanted the Indian Child Welfare Act to stand, that they were willing to throw us under the bus. And that's what they've been doing for centuries. Again, this stuff comes out of from 1823 with Chief Justice Marshall, and some of these final legal doctrines come in the 1830s. We're almost 200 years into this stuff. So slavery has been abolished. Citizenship has been granted to the formerly enslaved. We go through the Civil Rights Act. We go through the civil rights trauma, and we solved all those problems, right? We go through all this stuff. We go through protesting Vietnam. We go through all of this social change, and these things still stand solidly as legal principles, that laws are passed all the time regarding Native people. It's based on this authority. I mean, I say it all the time. There's a direct line between the plenary powers doctrine and the Supreme Court, which ruled in a gaming case in California called the Cabazon case, where they said, look, there's no underlying federal statute or statutory framework regulating or controlling or prohibiting native gaming. So California, you can't do anything to the Cabazons. That's basically what the Supreme Court said in 1987. So Congress rushed and they produced a law called the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. And in that act, they did something that undermined what native territories have been fighting for decades, which was to push the states out of our business. And they said, in order for Indian gaming to be legal, and they were talking about class 3, so we're talking about casino gaming, tribes had to enter into gaming compacts with the federal government. That's plenary powers. That's us treating us as wards of the state and then putting the states in control of our gaming. And there's a direct line between that and Kathy Hochul seizing the bank accounts of the Seneca Nation to squeeze $500 million out of them. That's my whole point. That's my whole point here. And look, I know I talk about this issue a lot, and I'm going to continue to talk about it because this is my life's work. I think it's important that people realize that. I have to stand up to this thing, and I have to educate as many people as possible. And hopefully, man, one of these young kids is going to come out of school and they're going to decide to study law. I don't care if they're native or non-native, and they're going to say, "Yeah, this is some pretty unrealistic stuff here. Unrealistic stuff."
Yeah.
So, look, I want to remind people we are listener-supported radio. I thank you for indulging me and listening to, these aren't just rants. I am giving you information that you're not going to get anywhere else. That's why what we do here on WBI is so important. So again, I ask that you go to the pledge lines. I ask that you support WBI. Do it in the name of Resistance Radio. Keep this conversation going, and let's spread it around. We got work to do. Reggie and I, we talked about it. We got to get young people involved. We got to do more engagement through the station, with the station, and without the station. I mean, I got to come to New York. I got to make some appearances down there and talk to some people. And if I'm not saying I'm going to get into high schools, but man, there's no reason I can't get into colleges. We got to do something to make that happen. So let's create a WBI Speakers Bureau. Let's get all of us who do this kind of good work out in the public, out in the mainstream media.
I agree. I totally agree, John. I think that is something that you have said before, and I agree. It's like we need to be creative in order to get our point across, but we can't do any of that unless first we need to engage with people, and then second, find those people to support us. And that's how that reciprocal thing happens all the time. And to give that number again, 833-922-4692. That's 833-922-4692 or 833-WBAI-NYC, 833-WBAI-NYC. And for those people online or not, you can still go and become a listener sustainer, buddy.wbai.org. That's buddy.wbai.org.
If you go to the basic, the home website, which is wbai.org, you can follow the prompts to donate there as well, and you'll get a lot more information about our programming and that kind of stuff. But please engage and support this. For any of you who have ever asked what you can do to help, this is what you can do to help. Keep us on the air. I greatly appreciate it. I look forward to continuing for hopefully many years. But that's kind of your call. That's up to you. It's up to you whether we sustain this radio station, we sustain this program, and my voice can still be heard. So I thank you for listening. Spread the word, and I'll be back next week. Thank you for listening. I'm John Kane. This is Resistance Radio, Yahweh.